Hi boys and girls. Today we are on lesson 8. It is Miss Barnes with you. Lesson 8 for our unit 9, our early explorations of North America, focuses on John Cabot. He's an explorer just like Christopher Columbus. And he, just like Christopher Columbus, had this idea that he wanted to find a shorter route to Asia from where he lived. And to understand a little more about John Cabot and to understand what we're going to read, I just want to go over the lines on our globe. So we have our longitude and we have our latitude. So boys and girls, the latitude lines here kind of remind me of a hula hoop that go around the globe. These are our horizontal lines, and they get bigger as we get in the middle of our globe, and they get smaller as you go further up or as you go further down. This middle line right here, the biggest one, is called the equator. And then we have our longitude. Our longitude, if you look at the word longitude, it has the word long in it. So these are the long lines. They go up and down on our globe. And they go all over the globe. And these are ways to help people locate things on a map. And the middle line here is called our prime meridian. So getting back with our listening and learning, we're going to go over our vocabulary before we get into our story. Our first vocab word is the circumference. That's the distance around the widest part of a round shape. So the circumference would be kind of like our equator here. Our next word is a commodity. We kind of learned about this word when we were talking about the Vikings unit. A commodity is a good or service that can be bought and sold, often delivered by shipment. Remember, we had to trade our commodities in our Vikings unit. We have the word embark. That means to get on a ship, an airplane, or another vehicle and begin a journey. We have the word geometry. It's a mathematical study of shapes, lines, and surfaces. We have the word merchandise. Those are goods that are bought and sold. The word navigational is related to the process of finding a new way around a place or a destination. And our last word is profit. So money made in businesses after all expenses costs are subtracted. So let's get started with our read aloud today. Earlier you learned about Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer who sailed to represent Spain's interests. Today you will learn about John Cabot, another Italian explorer who sailed to represent England's interests. We know very little about the early years of Cabot's life. Historians believe that he was born in Genoa, Italy, the same birthplace of Christopher Columbus. He was also born about the same time as Columbus. In his early years, John Cabot was known by his Italian name, Giovanni Cabot. He lived for many years in the Italian city of Venice, where he worked as a merchant and sailor. His work in Venice led him to travel along the coast of countries in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, where he further developed his navigational skills. As a merchant, he began to think that he could obtain spices more quickly and cheaply by finding a westward water route that would take him to the east. In 1493, Cabot and many Europeans learned that Christopher Columbus had an idea very similar to Cabot's, finding a water route to Asia by traveling west. After several years in Venice, Cabot relocated to Bristol, England in 1495. Shortly thereafter, Cabot took steps to embark on a voyage of his own, but one that was slightly different from Columbus's. Cabot had a simple idea. He knew the earth was spherical, and he knew that one of the properties of a sphere is the distance around it is greatest in the middle or at its circumference, and less on the top or the bottom. If you apply the basic geometry to the earth, It means that the circumference of the Earth is greater at the equator and is significantly less north or south of the equator. Think about a basketball. A circumference of a basketball, or the distance around it if you measure the very middle, is about 30 inches. The distance around the same ball, if you measure at a point closer to the top, is only 15 inches. Cabot thought Columbus had made a strategic mistake in his attempts to sail to the East Indies. Columbus had sailed in the middle latitudes close to the equator, where the distance would be longest. Cabot thought he could get to the East Indies faster by sailing at a more northerly latitude, where the distance would be shorter. He proposed heading north, hoping to find a northwest passage to Asia and to the East Indies. Cabot tried to find sponsors and investors to support his voyage to find the Northwest Passage. In 1496, Henry VII, the King of England, decided to sponsor Cabot. Merchants in Bristol helped support the voyage as well. Henry VII gave Cabot permission to explore and claim unknown lands for England. Cabot was also encouraged to bring any merchandise he acquired back to Bristol. Cabot was told he would enjoy a great share of the trade profits if his voyage was successful, so he would get lots of money or land. Cabot attempted 3 voyages across the Atlantic. The first voyage, attempted from Bristol, England, was not successful. Cabot and his men encountered terrible weather and ran short on supplies. In addition, Cabot had some disagreements with his crew regarding his route. With all the misfortunes that took place at the onset of the voyage, Cabot eventually decided to turn around and sail back to Bristol. Cabot's second voyage was more successful. Again, he had only one ship. It was a small ship called the Matthew with a crew of 18 men. Cabot and his men set sail from Bristol in May of 1497. They sailed past Ireland and across the Atlantic Ocean. On June 24th, they sighted land. Historians think Cabot made landfall somewhere in the area of southern Labrador, Newfoundland, or Cape Breton Island in present-day Canada, but the exact location is not known for certain. Cabot did not spend much time on land. It appears that he and his men got off the ship only once and did not wander inland more than a few hundred feet. They did not encounter any Native Americans, but found signs of their settlement. Cabot claimed the land for England, collected some fresh water, and got back on board his ship. Cabot and his men spent time exploring the coast of the area now known as the Cabot Strait, a channel 60 miles wide between northern Cape Breton Island and southwestern Newfoundland. On their other exploration of the coast, Cabot and his crew discovered some very good fishing grounds. As far as we know, Cabot was the first European to set foot in this part of North America, since the Vikings did around the year 1000 CE. Cabot returned to England and went to visit King Henry VII, certain that he had explored the northeast coast of Asia. He reported to the king that he discovered wonderful land in a place with a good climate. He mentioned the superb fishing grounds of which England could make great use. This discovery made King Henry VII very happy because at that time of Cabot's voyage, fish was a very expensive commodity. Seeing that his discoveries were welcomed, Cabot decided to return to the land he explored and sail until he reached another land in Asia full of spices and riches. The land that is today called Japan. In February of 1498, he received permission from King Henry VII to embark on another voyage. Very little is known about this third voyage, boys and girls. Historians don't know for sure, but this voyage probably involved around 200 men and maybe around 5 ships. Unfortunately, when Cabot and his expedition set off, one of his ships became damaged and the whole fleet had to stop in Ireland due to severe storms. Cabot was supposedly not heard from again, and some historians think that he even died on this voyage. Other historians think that he returned from his voyage and lived in London for a short time until approximately 1500. There is little evidence about this voyage or the whereabouts of Cabot after the voyage, so historians can't really be sure of its outcome. John Cabot was like Christopher Columbus in many ways. Both men were born in Genoa, Italy. Both men convinced foreign kings to sponsor their explorations. Both men attempted to sail to the East Indies and ended up finding something else altogether. Cabot's explorations proved very important for England. His attempts to find a northwest passage to the East Indies failed, but finding and claiming land on the continent of North America instead were essential for England to later establish British colonies.